everyone, and welcome to the September webinar of Humane Society University. As teachers and students get into the swing of a new school year, we're focusing this month on school realities, standards for success in humane education. We're going to look at the opportunities and challenges for including humane education in school curricula at all levels. We'll also explore ways to build partnerships between schools and community groups to capitalize on service learning programs and to expand the outreach of humane education programs. I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. Stephanie Idle-Clark is the director of the School of Continuing Education at Humane Society University and is also an assistant professor in our College of Arts and Sciences, where she focuses on curriculum development and humane education. Prior to joining HSU, she worked as a public school teacher, where she infused humane and character themes into the language arts curriculum. Stephanie holds a Master's of Education in Development and Strategies and a BS in Elementary Education, as well as being Certified Humane Education Specialist. She currently serves as the Education Chair on the Board of Directors for the Association of Professional Humane Educators and is pursuing her doctorate in education. Doctorate of Education in Leadership and Change from Fielding Graduate University. Heidi O'Brien is Curriculum and Educator Outreach Manager in Humane Society University's School of Continuing Education. She began her career as an animal shelter volunteer in the early 1990s and has worked on education programs with the Humane Society of the United States since 2002. Previously, Heidi was project coordinator for Massachusetts SPCA Animal Shelter, a research assistant at the Tufts Center for Animals and Public Policy, and a veterinary technician. She earned a Master of Science degree in Animals and Public Policy from Tufts University School of Veterinary Medicine and a BS in Animal Science from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She is also a Certified Humane Education Specialist. I'd like to welcome Stephanie and Heidi and ask them to take it away.
Thank you so much, Joan. This is Heidi. I'm pictured at right, and I want to thank you, Joan, for that very nice welcome and introduction of us. I'm thrilled that you're with us today to learn about partnering with your local schools. Stephanie and I have quite a bit to cover about our experiences and things we've heard and all kinds of knowledge and experiences we've gathered over the years working in this field. And we want to hear from you as well because we're constantly adding to that. So on that note, we have added several interactive features to this presentation. We'll be asking you several times to chime in and give your input in the chat box, which is in the dashboard on the right side of your screen on the bottom. We'll also have two polls today we'll be asking you to take. So I really hope you'll make use of that and be interactive with us because we really don't like just talking to a screen. We want to talk with you today, and we want to make it interesting. So to get us going today, I'd like to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of your young self when you were in elementary school or maybe middle school or even high school, and think about experiences you had as a young student with different community organizations, companies, or any outside groups outside your classroom. Think about those groups or individuals who visited your school, or maybe they sent materials or lessons, or in any other way contributed to your learning. For example, I remember in first grade we had a dentist, the local dentist, come to our classroom. And to this day, more than 30 years later, I still remember those lessons on brushing my teeth. If you had a humane organization visit, wonderful. By all means, we'd love to hear about that. But any group. So let's hear from you. Go ahead in the chat box. Just type in a few brief words, anything you may remember about who, what, and where different groups come into your classroom. Let's give you a few seconds on that. Okay, I see someone else had a dentist come in. Firefighter from the town fire department, that's very common as well. And I see weekly reader. We hear that from a lot of people, really enjoying weekly reader materials as a kid. So when we think about these experiences, and feel free to keep chiming in as I talk, we remember them from so many years ago. We see the value that they have. Maybe we remember a key lesson from the presenter like I did, or a particular publication. And those lessons stick with us to this day. Indeed, schools are a natural institution to approach and work with if you have a message for the public. Just want to go over a few points why we think schools are worthwhile in terms of working with. They are the only institution capable of reaching virtually all young people consistently. American schools average 180 days of instruction per year, and on these days, of course, students in grades K to 12 are spending most of their time here. The other point I want to make about schools is it's, of course, where the teachers are. And this is what one of the key points we have for you today. Teachers can help you do your job. If you partner with teachers, it's really key for long-term success, because we know that you can't visit every classroom every school year. We know that given the resources of most humane organizations, the manpower and the funding, you just can't get in that classroom consistently. So when you build a relationship with a teacher, they can carry your knowledge and your message to their students day in, day out, month after month and year after year. And so it's really important, and we encourage you to build those relationships. And good relationships usually have a give and take. The teacher will understand your message and be able to get your message to students. But you also, of course, have to make sure there's something in it for the teacher and that it helps them do their job. So we'll be talking about that today. Schools are an important influence on kids' moral behavior. I bring this up because so many of humane lessons have to do with right versus wrong, critical thinking, building good character, being responsible and kind. One study in 1999 looked at 1,000 Japanese students and 1,000 American elementary students, and found that moral behavior, schools actually play the primary role on kids' moral behavior, even over the home, which is really an unbelievable finding. Schools pose challenges for sure. We're going to cover these today, but they also offer many opportunities and rewards, which we want to cover. So before getting into the nuts and bolts of working with schools, we'd like to now hear from you in terms of, are you new to this process? Where are you in the process of working with schools? Do you have experiences with it, or are you new? So I'm going to launch a poll. And I want to clarify, we use the word, have you partnered with schools or after-school groups to deliver humane programs or lessons? Because we don't mean you necessarily have to be in the classroom talking in front of students, but have you provided materials or other resources or otherwise worked together? So I'm going to go ahead and open up this poll. I'm going to launch it now, and you should see it and be able to take this poll now. And it's yes or no, so I'll just give you a couple seconds. Okay, you've all voted, so I'm going to close this out. And now I'd like to share. This is great. 71% of you have worked with schools. This is wonderful. Well, I hope you're able to share some of those experiences with us today, and we can get them out to the whole group. So let's move on to some obstacles to working with schools. Like I said, Stephanie and I have certainly encountered some ourselves, both working in shelters and with the HSUS doing education programs in classrooms. But before we begin talking about some common ones for us, we want to hear from you again. So please, I hope you use the chat box to tell us if you have encountered any obstacles in working with your local schools. Please type them briefly. Give you a few seconds to do that. What is holding you back, or what obstacles have you encountered? Okay, I'm seeing lack of training, staff, time constraints. That is a common one for all of us. And unfriendly teachers and principals. Sometimes, yes, we have to deal with that. Well, thank you. I'm not surprised at some of these, with everyone so busy and with other priorities. And we'll certainly address some of that in the time we have today. So hopefully you can help get an edge and have the know-how to more confidently approach school. One more thing I want to mention before going forward is, we're talking about unfriendly teachers, is there was a study done recently by a Humane Literacy Coalition of Humane Educators, which actually showed that teachers and administrators are generally very interested in humane education. That is, once they know what it is. The study found that most teachers and principals are not familiar with the term humane education. So keep that in mind. That is part of our job, is to teach what it is. And we definitely find that once teachers and administrators see the value of it, that we can connect a very high interest topic, that is animals, to learning basic school subject matter. They're often very eager to be involved. One big obstacle we'd like to discuss today is one that's on just about everyone's minds these days because it makes the news very often, and that is school budgets and cuts. Just last month, Parade Magazine ran a special report, that's our image on the left side, called Rebuilding America's Schools, which highlighted the fact that our schools are in very poor shape structurally, and it's just one sign of a shortage in funds for schools. This article pointed out that on average, the American school is 40 years old, and schools around the country are suffering roof leaks, walls ridden with termites and lead paint. So about 40% of the nation's 100,000 public schools are in bad to poor condition. That's according to a professor at Virginia Tech, professor of education. Schools are cutting basic things like supplies, and teachers are being laid off. The image at the right-hand side of the screen is a news story from North Carolina earlier this month, which detailed the loss of 48 school buses in operation due to budget cuts, which left students waiting 30 minutes or longer at home or at school. And another story I saw in the news recently was in Pennsylvania, in the Eastern Area School District. There were budget cuts that cut 135 jobs, including 72 teachers. And as a result of this, of course, class sizes were increased, and middle school teachers who remain lost their planning period. One of the first things to go with budget cuts is the already small teacher discretionary fund, which is often used for items like supplemental resources, like the weekly readers or Kind News, if you're familiar with Kind News. That fund is used to pay for photocopies and paper throughout the school year and supplemental resources, like I said. So as budget cuts increase more and more, this must be provided by the teacher personally or by parents. In fact, I just got a notice home that my son needed $5 for Time for Kids, which, of course, some families can't pay for, especially if you have multiple children. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie for ways we can work with this obstacle.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you again to Joan for that lovely introduction, and to all of you who joined us today. I'm very lucky. I feel like I know many of you who are on the call, either virtually or we've gotten to meet in person. So Heidi has shared some obvious saddening news. None of us want to think about how our schools may be suffering or that our children may be going to dilapidated buildings. And schools certainly are cutting back on basic things like supplies and buses. I know my last few years in the classroom, the reading department in which I taught, that department budget shrunk every year at the end of the year when we go to order our new materials or our new textbooks. I always felt like it was a little bit smaller and we had to stretch our dollars a little bit more. So with trends like that, some of you on our webinar today may be thinking, it can't be a good time to partner with schools on humane education. They don't have money for what they normally do. But you may find that this obstacle makes it a perfect time to increase your programming. First, I want to briefly talk about the 2009 stimulus package. The school stimulus package has definitely helped a lot of our schools, but they're still hurting financially. The package provided $54 billion in funds to help prevent or restore state budget cuts. $39 billion of that money had to go toward K through 12 and higher education, which basically means that went toward keeping positions, keeping teachers in schools. Another $25 billion had to go to the No Child Left Behind and special education programs, which again helped to keep teachers in their positions so that the class sizes would not have to grow. The education departments distributed the money from 2009 to 2011, and states have 5 years to spend it. So we're still in that time. Some of the schools with whom you work or those in your area may still be looking to spend some of their stimulus package money. For example, the state of Indiana, they've already shared how they're using their stimulus funds. They've given $168 million to Title I, which is poverty-based federal grant programming. They've given $253 million for K through 12 and approximately $9 million for preschool for the IDEA, which is special education federal grant money. Well, of course, most schools do not have in-house humane educators. I want everyone on the webinar today to think about how you can use the information that we just shared about the stimulus package. How you can learn about how the stimulus is being used locally, and then how your programs fit into their work. So using the Indiana example, their big push is obviously special education, and they give a lot of money to pre-K programs or preschool programs. So how could some of your work fit in with what they're doing? And you're welcome to put in some ideas, especially some of you on the call who I know are already working with preschool programs, and we can share them at the end. Given the fact that schools are hurting financially, we can also keep in mind that we can consider them in need. They need supplemental resources, just like Heidi was saying. She mentioned Weekly Reader, and she mentioned Kind News. Teachers need lesson plan ideas or supplies that might include a humane theme. But schools and teachers obviously aren't able to go out and buy these new materials. So again, think about how can you provide these materials? What can you provide for lesson plan ideas? Or later on today, we're going to talk about service learning projects. In fact, maybe your organization can sponsor a classroom subscription of Kind News. And actually, as a thank you for everybody who attended today, you're going to receive a special discounted price for Kind News subscription. So look for that when you get the follow-up recording. Something else to think about, and this is the one I get the most excited about, is how humane education or humane groups can broaden their humane programming and also bring in funds, bring in money. You heard me right. I did say bring in money. So schools work really hard to provide social, cultural, and character building opportunities for their students. And as we move through the webinar, you're going to, if you don't already, realize that you offer all of these items. You already have everything the school wants by offering social and character building experiences. In fact, you may be able to arrange an in-house field trip, and the pictures at the bottom left of the screen are examples of some in-house field trips or assemblies. One of the most popular in-house field trips I ever attended was on birds of prey. A rehab group visited the middle school where I worked, and an entire grade entered the gym hearing audio of bird calls. They saw posters and banners with different birds of prey. The lights were low. They were hooked right away. The speakers came out and they began to talk about birds of prey in depth and how important they were, the different types, how they could learn to spot different types of birds of prey. They had PowerPoint slides they shared with the students. At the end of the presentation, they brought out one or two of the birds of prey who were rehabbed but who could not be returned to the wild. The students in the 7th grade talked about it for days. I mean, I think I read so many reports about birds of prey that year, and it was all because of an in-house field trip. So your group could offer a similar experience and charge an assembly fee. If you're not sure why I'm excited about this assembly fee, this is often upwards of $1,000 to $5,000 in some districts. And the district may be excited because while they're paying you the assembly fee, they do not have to pay money for bus fare or lunch tickets. So overcoming obstacle 1, it definitely can be daunting, but I know, because I do know a lot of you on here, I know the type of people we have on this webinar, and the type of workers who are in the humane field. So we can definitely overcome it. So I'm going to turn over to Heidi now for our second obstacle.
Thank you, Stephanie. Those are some really good tips. On to our second obstacle. We often hear from many of those working in humane organizations, I can't even get my school's principals on the phone, never mind work with them. So when you think about making contact with a school, keep in mind that, of course, teachers are in front of students most of the day, and principals are very busy. They're constantly barraged with complaints and special requests. And to illustrate a day in the life of a principal, we like to refer to an article we found in Principal Magazine way back in 2001 about one principal, Pamela Stanfield from Missouri. She actually gave her own account of a particularly difficult day where she was pulled in different directions. So just to give you three of the things that happened that day. She had to deal with a young student having a potty training accident in the auditorium. She had a volunteer come to her about the fish in the lobby fish tank coming down with a disease. She had residents calling the school complaining about the new school sign and that it was blocking the sun in their yard. So this is all on top of dealing with student discipline and overseeing curriculum and testing. So you can imagine everything that's on the shoulders of a principal. And in many ways, it reminds me of the role of a animal shelter manager. So although functions of principals vary by locality and school size, the principal is generally responsible for administering all aspects of a school's operations. But I don't want you to fear on this. Stephanie will share some ideas for getting past this one.
All right, thanks, Heidi. I will be honest, I think this can be the most stressful obstacle in some cases. Heidi's right. Everyone is busy. Teachers are busy, administrators are busy, and you're busy. So it can be very frustrating and very, very stressful when you're trying to connect with someone and it just doesn't work. But because humane organizations and schools are both big parts of a community, they are definitely entities that are ripe for partnership. Best advice I can give really is to stay positive and to remember that it helps to start with knowing sometimes who the animal teacher or the animal administrator is in the school. Sometimes that might be a great way to begin a program. If you are trying to get in touch with someone, don't give up when trying to make contact. After school is usually the best time to get in touch. An article in this month's Reader's Digest actually includes tips from the principal, and the principal recommended trying to get in touch in the morning as well, before teachers are tired from the day. You can imagine working with 150 students. You may be tired at the end of the day and a little less receptive to someone who wants to start a new project. From my experience, one of the worst times to reach school personnel is once classes start after homeroom. Teachers are on the go from the moment that homeroom bell rings, and in most cases, they will not take calls until the end of the day. I know for me, I can definitely say I refuse to take most phone calls unless it was an absolute emergency. So with this in mind, a friendly email or a note succinctly describing your proposal might be your best bet. In fact, your brief note can probably lead to an arranged meeting. When you get your meeting, and you will, just be prepared and be brief. So this obstacle may be stressful, but in the long run, it's definitely worth it. Well, Heidi's going to ask you an interesting question on this next slide.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, so as we move to our third potential obstacle, in working with schools, which is issues approaching schools, we do have another poll. And this is a multiple choice one. We want to know, what would your opening line be in asking a teacher or principal to use your humane education program or services? So I'm going to launch the poll. We basically are starting this out with, I'd like to speak with you about. And I'm going to launch this one, and there are 3 choices, and I'll give you a minute to choose carefully.
I can tell our participants are thinking about this one.
It's a good thing. Take your time. We have 80% of you who voted. I'll give you a couple more seconds here. Okay, great. You've all voted. I'm going to close it out and share with you all. Okay, interesting. We have 45 of you choose A. I'd like to speak with you about setting up a meeting with you to discuss ideas. And 45% of you chose C. I'd like to speak with you about how our programs connect with your science curriculum. And finally, 10% said our volunteers want to visit your school. Well, you're on the right track in terms of wanting to discuss ideas, but we like choice C because we like being very specific about how you can help a school. So C is the right answer here. I'd like to speak with you about how our programs connect with your science curriculum. And if you can find an article in the news or on this Department of Education website talking about science test scores being in trouble, you can refer to that, even better. You are showing a school that you're speaking their language and you understand what they're dealing with. So that's where we're heading for on this one. Very good. I'm going to hide this poll. And here's our third obstacle, which I think is obvious to many of us, but our passion for animals and for humane education sometimes makes it easy to forget. So we like to mention this one. That teachers and principals don't necessarily view humane concepts as essential school subject matter. And to illustrate this as well, we love this quote from education professor at University of Oklahoma, and former education professor at University of Oklahoma, and one of the founders of DHSU Education Division back in the 70s, Stuart Westerland. Dr. Westerland said, "The simple fact that many of us have a sublime faith in humane education does not mean that the faith is affirmed by others." Now I'm going to turn over to Stephanie to see how do we need to be thinking in terms of what is essential school subject matter.
I think Heidi alluded to it really well, and we actually hinted at the answer to overcoming obstacle 3 from the very beginning. In our first obstacle, we discussed a great way to overcome the lack of funding is to provide resources. This obstacle is very similar. To overcome obstacle 3, we just need to ascertain the school's educational priorities before we attempt to initiate a partnership. Just like any other partnership that we might go about making, whether it be a fundraising initiative or a way to bring in new members or new people to adopt who haven't visited the shelter before. Basically, figure out what it is that the school is working on and then frame your program as a way to address those priorities. We may actually already have allies in the schools. I don't know if you remember when I said a great person to find might be the animal teacher or the animal principal in a district. Ask the kids or ask the parents, if you found an animal who was injured in the parking lot, who would you go to? They'll tell you the name of the person, and you might be surprised to hear that name over and over again. Or maybe you're already in touch with a school personnel, be it a teacher or staff or an administrator who's already working to get students to become aware of your organization. We mentioned asking parents. We mentioned asking the teachers themselves what they need. Don't forget to ask the PTO. That's a little different than just asking the general parents. The PTO may often work as a whole on an issue throughout a year. And so perhaps your issue can become what the PTO makes their event for the year. With more states focusing in on social and emotional learning, this might also be a good way for you to begin to overcome obstacle 3. When the teachers say that they're just too busy, it's not what they're working on, you can show them that you can meet academic standards, character education, which we'll get into a little bit later, and of course social and emotional learning. hopefully this one will be a little bit easier, and we can remember that even if the school doesn't necessarily care about our priorities, we can show them that we understand where they're coming from and that we can partner. And the bottom is in big red letters, be willing to compromise. I think this is a really important thing to remember when you're beginning your first partnerships. You may only get the chance to partner with one grade level or one teacher the first year that you offer a program. That's okay. Or you may only get to do part of what you propose, and that's fine too. Because when it's successful and the students are excited and they're achieving and they're meeting their standards because they're so interested in the humane topic, the next thing you know, more teachers are going to be reaching out to you. I'm going to turn it over to Heidi for obstacle 4.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. To move on to this one, I'd like to ask those of you who have worked with schools and principals, schools in general, which is most of you, to answer the question. When working with teachers or principals, has the subject of education standards or standardized testing come up? And those of you who are saying yes right now, I'd like you to please add a few words on your experience. What have you heard from teachers and teachers and principals when you're talking about offering your resources, your materials? What have they said about education standards? You could type in a few comments in chat. We would appreciate it. Give you just a few seconds. I'm hearing teachers tell me they're too busy to work on topics not addressed in standards and tests. Yes. We have to work from standards. So teachers say we have to work from standards guidebooks only. We cannot use text or other text or supplemental resources. Yes, I've heard that as well. State standards and testing are not new, and I'd like to just define education standards for those of you who are not familiar with it. An education standard is a benchmark of what a student should know at a certain grade level. We're going to show you specific examples of this later on in the presentation. You'll see a couple examples of different state standards programs up on your screen. Texas Assessment of Knowledge and Skills, or TAKS. They usually have an acronym. I'm in Massachusetts, and we hear about MCAS constantly from teachers and on the news. I love that Florida is a sunshine state, but their test is called FCAT, or Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test. And of course, in New York, it's the Regents exam. So each one of these tests is administered to different subjects at certain grade levels, and in many cases, satisfactory performance is required as a prerequisite to graduate from high school. Then along came 2001 and gave the state standards even more teeth with No Child Left Behind, signed by President Bush. So basically, when No Child Left Behind was signed, the standards and testing grew in importance for schools. It became more and more part of a teacher's job to get ready for these exams. So in general, it made the schools and states accountable because funding was at stake. There were serious consequences for failure, including losing funding. I mentioned certain grade levels are tested at the state. For No Child Left Behind, grades 3 to 8 in reading and math is a basic part of the law that was signed. So I'm going to turn over to Stephanie to talk about, if we're hearing teachers can be frustrated with standards, how can we deal with them?
All right, thanks guys. This is my favorite obstacle, I think. So I want everybody to kind of get ready to start chatting with us, because the next slide, we're going to be asking some questions and asking you to be creative. Standards can sound really difficult. And I think this sounds like it's the scariest obstacle of them all. But No Child Left Behind and the standards, they don't have to make our jobs more difficult. In fact, we can use them to our advantage. I always tell people not to let standards turn you off. Use them as your roadmap. Use them as guideposts. The best place to find your standards for humane lessons will be your specific State Department of Education website. You may have to do a little bit of digging on the State Department of Education website, and if you have any difficulty, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you find them. You can also find education standards at educationworld.com. They have a whole section on the Common Core standards as well as the state standards. So it's a great starting place, especially if you're a little intimidated by the Department of Education website. So basically, to overcome this obstacle, all you have to do is align what you want to teach with a standard that already exists. All right, this is what I warned everybody about. Let's show the next slide. I want everyone to take a moment and read the Texas Science Standard for kindergarten. As you're reading, think about how you can connect this standard to a humane lesson, and please write it in the chat area. Okay, I see a few answers coming in. So for teaching students about identifying basic needs of living organisms and giving examples of how living organisms depend on each other, good. It connects to responsible pet care. Pets will need food, water, and shelter. Right, that's perfect for kindergartners. I'm going to bring up a picture. Let's see if we can make the connections any more easily. Here's a picture of a dog next to a house. There's some items in the background. Now, using the standard that living organisms have basic needs, what kind of lesson could we create using this picture? I see something coming in about students will recognize that the water bowl is frozen and that their dog is not meeting the basic need, getting basic needs met. Yes, good. Sorry, I'm scrolling through and the bar is very small. Ooh, I see some interesting ideas that I think I missed. It came in before we brought the picture of the dog up, but different items about conservationists, saving the rainforest, and preserving the basic needs of the animals who live there. I like that. I like that. Somebody actually just mentioned the book Buddy Unchained. Looks like it'd be perfect for this book. So, thank you. Heidi, can you bring up the next picture? I actually was going to say that Buddy Unchained is a perfect way to loop in literature to the science standard. The students are going to look at this picture of the dog, and just like one of you wrote, kids are going to know right away that water bowl is frozen. There's snow in there. He doesn't have fresh water he can drink. We find that students will often tell us, they'll see right away that there's no straw in that doghouse, and that there's a lot of paw prints, which means he's probably not just been there for a little bit to go to the bathroom. He's probably been there for a very long time. Great. Thank you, guys. Those are wonderful suggestions. Basically, a simple photo or a simple picture book can be the perfect connection to the standards and a great way for you to get your foot in the door with a school district. And sort of on a side note before we go on, science standards are a great place to start, and that's because you might be familiar with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's a huge push right now. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi for obstacle 5.
Thank you, Stephanie. This next one is one we don't think we need to worry about too much or do too much about, but we do want you to be aware of, and that is commercial competition. And what I mean by that is corporations wanting to get their message into the schools and competing with humane organizations and other nonprofits for teachers' time and attention. So I just have one example up here, and that's McDonald's. That is one corporation seeking to send its message into schools. McDonald's created the Educational Resource Catalog containing all kinds of brochures, pamphlets, and videos at little or no cost to teachers. And these materials are covering a wide range of topics including fire safety, nutrition, cultural programs, environment and career planning, which are all things schools are working on. And by the way, website consumersunion.org, which publishes consumer reports, used to monitor corporate outreach to school kids and is now positioning consumer reports to help teachers assess different products critically and offers a planning guide for teachers. So when you see McDonald's or Mars Candy Bars or Kohl Foundation or other corporations wanting to get into schools, I know it often sends people's hackles up. They get a little nervous about these different messages and agendas in schools. So it's very important that teachers are paying attention to critical thinking. But the take-home here is that corporations do market to schools. They're often sending in free stuff, competing for teachers' time and their mailbox space, which is one thing we want to point out. If you are mailing stuff to schools, teachers do get a lot of mail, and sometimes it's sent right by corporations for free, and they have quite a bit of money to spend on it. So keep that in mind. I now want to go back to Stephanie to talk about putting this obstacle in perspective for us.
Thanks, Heidi. This is when I wish we could see all of our attendees with webcams, because I'm imagining hands up in the air, eyes maybe rolling, going, how do we compete with McDonald's? Do you know how much money they have? And they have Ronald. We're actually saying that you have an advantage over McDonald's. You're grounded in the principles of good character. You're not hiding a sales pitch. You're not trying to sell them a Happy Meal. And you're actually helping to create the future citizens of the town or the city where you live. In fact, in some locations, businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit, are becoming involved in school programming because they realize that the schools are where their next employees come from. Please don't worry about the kind of packaged products. But now we're going to move on to school realities that present opportunities. And we already slightly discussed the first one, which is that schools are committed to teaching good character. It's hard to find a school not teaching character education. And those were the pillars that you just saw up on the screen. The virtues, respect, kindness, responsibility, courage. All of those are things that we as humane educators teach as well. Character, humane education, and social emotional learning can be a partner. You can even add in anti-bullying programs. They're very, in many schools, they are now taking the place of the character education programs. All of them are a proactive approach to creating positive social change. So that's something that you may want to use, again, in your proposal. As Heidi mentioned early in our webinar, the study by the Humane Literacy Coalition showed interest in humane education on the part of formal teachers and administrators. And when asked how they could utilize humane theme resources, the proactive approaches to building citizenship and character was one of the most commonly cited when the qualitative data was reviewed. Let's very, very briefly on the next slide take a quick look at some character education mandates. Here in Connecticut, in elementary education, character education is actually mandated. You'll notice that there's words like service projects. That students will be learning about how to be a responsible citizen and obeying laws. All of those things play into what we teach. Another resource that I recommend each of you research when you have time is the Whole Child Movement. And the best place to find material is ASCD.org. ASCD.org is really driving the Whole Child Movement, and the Whole Child Movement, again, is just a great partner to humane education and character education. It's asking schools and asking after-school programs to begin to look at how the whole child learns, not just an individual subject in a silo. Heidi, go ahead and take it away for opportunity 2.
Thanks, Stephanie. Our next opportunity is health and safety, which is usually built into the education standards. And on your screen, we're showing the health education standards in grades K to 2 for Pennsylvania. I want you to take a minute to read these standards on our slide and think about how we can turn these standards into an opportunity. That is, how can we connect it to our work in the humane field? I want you to take a minute to read it and then chat any ideas you have in the chat box. Teach bite prevention. Absolutely. Rabies. Leave wildlife alone.
Ooh, I got a
Absolutely.
good one too, Heidi. Barking dogs and petting strange dogs. Thanks, David.
Definitely. As I'm reading this, I just have dog bite prevention and wildlife safety just screaming out to me. So I'm glad you're coming up with these as well. Very good. This is a real win-win. It's a win-win-win-win in my mind, because when we connect our issues to these standards, we're not only serving the school and our organizations, our mission, we're serving the interests of the community and health and safety. So I really love this topic when we're talking about opportunities for humane education in the schools. Now over to Stephanie to move on with publicity.
Thanks. Opportunity 3 is one we're not going to spend a lot of time on. It's just something that, sort of an FYI. I always joke with Heidi, I like to share any of the little secrets that I learned from my time in the classroom with humane educators to make their life easier. And this is one of them. Principals, they're trained in PR. That's one of the things they actually need to learn, because they're seeking positive publicity for their schools. We see things in the newspaper or on the TV fairly often, both good and bad, about schools and their test scores, academic programs. Why shouldn't it be a story about your work with the school? So one of the best things we can recommend is to offer some programming for the school and then help to put schools in the spotlight. Provide schools with a way to enhance their profile in the community. And basically the two best tips: offer the program and then publicize their achievement. And again, it can be television or it can be newspaper, but I can speak from experience on this one. It makes the principals and the school board very happy, and in fact they may be willing to help fund future programs or future partnerships. Okay, Heidi, opportunity 4 is a little bit longer one.
Yes, we're now going to switch gears and move to another way of working with schools that doesn't necessarily occur within the school walls, and that's service learning. I'm going to show some stats illustrating the tremendous growth in this phenomenon. Essentially, service learning is community service with an academic focus, and you'll see the incredible growth from 1984 to 1999. And unfortunately, those are the last big statistics we have when a report was done on this topic. But it's still going strong, and there's a National Service Learning Conference every year that Stephanie and I have been to a few times, which is just huge. There's thousands of young people and youth leaders there, and teachers. So this is a really big opportunity, actually, and because of federal initiatives aimed at increasing youth service, there's more funding for this in schools. Schools in every state now have service learning programs, and it's often a requirement for graduation. I know that's the case in Maryland and several other states. So when I say it doesn't have to occur in the school, students can do a project that takes place at an animal shelter, for example, within the walls of a humane organization. And some of the ways you can make use of this, all this service learning going on in the schools, is you can identify schools with programs, learn how they work, and basically just offer up your agency as a resource. And you can offer students different opportunities, including fundraisers, public awareness campaigns. We have an example of that in the next slide. Students are great at technology, at creating websites and web pages. They like to be creative and design newsletters. We put the posters, so keep students in mind for these types of tasks if you can get together with your school, with your local schools. Unfortunately, this image on this slide didn't come out great, but it just shows you the overlap between, in the left circle, is the community, and the right circle is the school. And in the middle there, you get that civic engagement, students doing real-world learning and fulfilling a real need in the community. So here's just one example of that, as I mentioned. Students in their senior year in Washington were asked by a nearby shelter to help create a PSA on spay and neuter. And they did so, and they photographed each step of the process, so showed, that they proved that they did their work and helped determine their final grade in that case. So this is just one example showing a real need in the community. It's a win-win for the nonprofit and for the students. The shelter benefits, the animals benefit, and the students learned a skill in their academics that they needed to learn to get their credit. If you're looking for ideas of ways you can involve students in service learning at your organization, we've actually come up with a list, and this is something we've built over the years, doing workshops such as this one, and webinars such as this one, where we've called out in the crowd and we've had participants in Animal Care Expo and other conferences brainstorm what they need at their shelter and how students can help. And we've come up with lists of different projects by subject area. So in language arts, math, science, social studies, and we've put these all up on our website so you can all get some ideas. You'll find the list of academic subjects and service learning projects at humanesociety.org. You just have to search service learning ideas. And by all means, if you have an idea to add on there, we would love to hear from you. And I think we're having some technical difficulties with our chat box, but you can always use the questions box still in our email, of course, which we'll have at the end for you once again. I'm going to turn it back to Stephanie now.
Okay, can you go to the next one? Heidi? Can you forward to the resources slide?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Thanks. Okay, so Heidi gave some resources that were specifically for service learning. We wanted to share resources for both the students and the educators. For students, you can find many different resources at our students page. So it's humanesociety.org/students. There you can find school help projects, because I can almost guarantee some of you on this list get phone calls or emails from students who are doing school projects, research papers, and they want to learn about what you do. If your organization doesn't have someone on staff who can answer each one of those calls, please feel free to send them to our students page where there's a school help project. It's broken down by subject area. It'll at least maybe help the students narrow down their questions for when they come back to you the second time. Students can also register for free online courses. There's a career fair there for them so they can virtually research different careers that might be of interest to them. If you're an educator or a parent, you can visit the Parents and Educators page where we have free lesson plans. We also have awards and grants that are available there. So if some of you are inspired after this webinar to go and reach out to the schools and you form a partnership, you may actually be able to earn $1,000 that can be used in that project by the school. So you can find out all the information there. And then, of course, I know some of you on this webinar actually already are in the Certified Humane Education Specialist program. But for those of you who are not, if you're looking for more professional development, Humane Society University offers a series of instructor-led online courses in the School of Continuing Education, and that's our Certified Humane Education Specialist program. And we're very excited that in the College of Arts and Sciences, we have just launched our graduate certificate in humane education. So if you're looking for more of a degree program, then you definitely want to check out the new graduate certificate. And I think we're right near the very end. We hope you found at least one idea during your time with us that you can take and used to approach schools in your community. We hope that any hesitance that you may have had about working with schools was something either we discussed or we helped to demystify in some way, and that you can view schools as institutions that are really just waiting for you to reach out in a partnership. If there's something you have a question about, please shoot it into the chat box. And of course, you are also welcome to email us if something comes up after we all get off the webinar. Our email addresses will be up throughout the question and answer period.
I'd like to thank both Stephanie and Heidi. If there are questions, we have about 2 minutes left. Does anyone want to pose a question or a comment?
Oh, I got a question. Is there a way to download the PowerPoint? We will actually be sending within 2 to 3 days the recorded version of the webinar that will have the PowerPoint with it. And you will also receive the special discount code for Kind News that's only available to the webinar attendees. Good question, Sarah.
Are we seeing any other questions?
I'm seeing some comments. Let's see. I do see. Okay, we indicated that Connecticut has just supported, not mandated, humane education. Could we clarify?
That's actually a very good question. Do you want to take that since you're up in New England, Heidi?
Yes. I'm trying to recall what happened in the legislature there. I know teachers were not wanting one more thing on their plate than to be required to do anything, so I believe it was sort of a compromise there. So the legislature supported it, which is very vague, yeah, and unfortunate there because it wasn't doing anything very concrete, but was saying that humane education was a good thing and that schools should look for ways to incorporate it. So very vague, but just offered a little bit of support for it there.
We had another attendee share an example of how a local school is actually partnering with their group. The school's developing and running a kids area or a kids section in their Run for Animals. Sounds like it's probably one of the 5K or the mile-long races, and they're having a specific kids section. That's a great service learning project.
That's wonderful. Well, we're getting to the end. We're right about at 60 minutes now. I'd like to thank both Stephanie and Heidi and thank everyone who has joined us today for this great webinar on ways to incorporate humane education into our schools and to get humane education and schools partnering with community groups. I hope you will also join us for our next webinar, which is on Thursday, October 18th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. This is going to be a very special webinar. Our very own Humane Society University President, Dr. Andrew Rowan, will be giving a delightfully whimsical Halloween-themed presentation entitled Beasts of the Imagination, Familiars, Vampires, Werewolves, and Things That Go Bump in the Night. Dr. Rowan will be exploring the fascinating legends and beasts of lore, examining traditions and stories deeply rooted in the primordial relationship we humans have with other non-human animals. You do not want to miss that one. We'll be sending you an invitation for this, a recording for today's webinar, and updates on all our future Humane Society University webinars. Until then, everyone have a great Tuesday, and thank you again for joining us.